Some added takeaways from Week 11. How about this Auburn-Mississippi State game? I have no clue. You ask me, I have no clue. So the final here is Mississippi State 43, Auburn 34. How? Anyone who watched the game, how? How does Auburn lead a game 28-3 and trail it 43-28 in the same afternoon? I can't make any sense of that. For the record, that is 40 unanswered that Mike Leach and Will Rogers and Mississippi State rattled off. Bo Nix had a good day yesterday. He was 27 of 41. He threw it for 377, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Bo Nix, the news late this afternoon, is ankle injury. He is out for the remainder of the regular season at least. And then it remains to be seen about any kind of bowl game. But he was one-upped by Will Rogers, who goes 44 of 55, 415 yards, 6 touchdowns, just a crazy second-half comeback, and you're watching it. I went back and watched it this morning, and the whole time, you're knowing the ending, you're asking yourself, how is that ending? How is that final score going to be made possible? And right there in front of you, it happens. Crazy to watch. Mississippi State, probably one of the more underrated coaching jobs and overall teams in America right now, is Mississippi State because they're so anonymous, because they're not in the thick of any race, but yet they're playing pretty good football. And I know the playoff committee's had them ranked. I mean, we've had them power rated. They're playing good football. They're in the wrong division. But hats off to Mississippi State. It would have been so easy at 28-3. It would have been so easy to do what a lot of teams with better resources than you are doing right now, and that's laying down, and Mississippi State didn't. Florida State gets off the deck, 31-28. FSU beats Miami. I really felt like the first quarter telegraphed a lot of this thing, and it ended up doing so. Now, Miami made it a game in the end, but when you have 3 turnovers and 8 penalties in the first quarter, that screams 2 things. Number one, it's going to be a long afternoon for you, but your opposition only scored 10 points off those turnovers, so you still had a shot. But the second thing it screams is you're not ready to play. I think we all know who that falls in the lap of. More on that in a second. But Florida State's defense was huge here. Same theme as we talked about with Ole Miss. They stuffed the run. They held Tyler Van Dyke to, I want to say, 53% completion percentage. And so several facets of this team did what it collectively needed to do to win yesterday. It's so big for recruiting. I know a lot of you aren't paying attention right now because we're not talking about FSU or Miami being in the top 5. But in order to eventually get there, it's a progression. And right now, there were some kids in that stadium yesterday that were going to decide between these 2 teams. And I think that it's pretty clear one is trending in a better direction than the other. That's not just drawing from one result, although the result matters a whole lot. That's why they play the game. And so Mike Norvell and his staff, they got a big win there. They will reap the reward and the benefit from that. I don't know what's going to happen with Manny Diaz. I think they're going to finish the season. I don't feel great about it down there. I don't have any intel on Manny Diaz. I don't feel great about it. I know that before they went on this little mini winning streak of theirs, a lot of people were under the impression, as was I, whether you agreed with it or not, that he was given the old win or you're fired ultimatum, the old Herman Boone treatment. I don't know that I feel great about the prospects for Manny Diaz right now, but as of right now, nothing decided at Miami. What about this Michigan-Penn State game? Producer Jesse, all sorts of frazzled about this, as he should be. Michigan goes into Penn State. They win 21-17. So Penn State, where are we at right now? They opened up 5-0, and now they've gone 1-4 since then. Meanwhile, Michigan, you're looking at their schedule right now. They are a 1-loss team. And the thing that I think as I watched this game was, number one, it's so even. The box score is crazy even. Go look at the box score from this thing. And second thing I'm thinking about Michigan is Jim Harbaugh has to be in heaven right now because this is his kind of team. This is the absolute embodiment of what Jim Harbaugh wants in a football team. He wants hard-nosed, he wants difference makers on defense and at running back, and he wants a team that feels like it's been screwed. And we can check every box with this Michigan team. They got all those personnel pieces, and they feel like the Michigan State game was taken from them by officials. And they may not be wrong about it, but regardless of your opinion on that, that's the identity of this Michigan team right now. And there are a lot of people in Big Ten country that believe that's why this one has the best shot to upend the likes of Ohio State later in the year in a situation where Ohio State has to come to them. And that is pretty sound logic. I follow it. But this was a close game yesterday, 21-17 the final. I think I'm more interested, ironically, in what the outcome means for Penn State. Like, where are they going forward? Because it's such a long season. When you look at it, as we've talked about this a few times, it's so popular for fans to say, boy, the season, you wait for it and it goes by in the blink of an eye. Well, it really doesn't. These are long seasons. How long ago does it feel that Penn State was beating Wisconsin, and then they beat Auburn, and then they beat Indiana, and then they lost to Iowa close? Like, these things feel like a year ago to me, and they are all from this season. So Michigan wins, and they are moving ever closer. They're keeping themselves firmly in contention in that playoff picture, and they're moving ever closer to one of the more consequential games in a long time. What about Ohio State? Speaking of the other participant in that game, Ohio State 59, Purdue 31. I had surprising pushback last week. I mean, really suspicious was the pushback I had when I told you I thought this game was going to be a blowout. I understood why you thought there was potentially an upset brewing. You just watched Purdue beat Michigan State, and you had just watched Ohio State struggle but win against Nebraska. And a basic understanding of how this sport works was what I used, also with the model's help, to forecast a blowout here. We didn't even spend much time breaking down the game last week. That's how confident we were that this was going to be a blowout. In fact, I think I predicted the exact halftime score, which I don't claim to be a skill, but we did get lucky with that one. There was a rubber banding effect, a progression, regression to the mean, if you will. But the thing about it is, that factor is on steroids when you have an ultra-talented team. I told you last week, one of the reasons I love a blowout here is the progression regression factor, but the other was C.J. Stroud got trashed a healthy amount last week, publicly. So did this offensive line. Let me tell you what they did yesterday. Stroud was 31 of 38 with 6 touchdowns. Excuse me, just 5 touchdowns. Not quite half a dozen. Threw for 361. How about the running game for Ohio State? How about 31 runs, 263 yards? That's about 8.5 per clip. Is that good enough? I think it was good enough. It was surgical, pretty surgical in their precision yesterday. They've got Michigan State at the Horseshoe Saturday. We will be in attendance on the sideline for that game. First time ever. Cannot believe that's a reality. First time I have ever been to an Ohio State game. Some other games that stood out yesterday. Oklahoma State, I think, is one of the more anonymous, high-level teams that we've had in the sport in several years. I dare you to tell me you've watched more than one Oklahoma State game, unless you're a Cowboy fan or you're a diehard Big 12 fan. They just haven't been on the national radar. I assume they love it that way. 63-17, they were one of our best bets yesterday. They blanked TCU. And it's a really good team. I don't know what else to say. It's a really good team right now. And they've got Oklahoma coming in there in a couple of weeks. It's a tall task. Let me put it that way. I'm not going to say I don't see anything happening. It's a tall task to be asked of Oklahoma, given how much they struggled against Baylor yesterday. Notre Dame's seemingly biggest remaining obstacle was a road game against Virginia. They won 28-3, and they are the proverbial shark fin in the playoff pool right now. They're just out there, and they're not in the top 4, but they're out there. And then you say it again, but they're not in the top 4, and then for a third time you say, but they're out there. And that's all that needs to be said right now with 2 or 3 weeks to go. What about Arkansas? I was sitting next to an Arkansas fan on the plane last night on the way home, and about every 5 minutes it was, hey, we got an update on Arkansas? And it's like, well, we both have the same Wi-Fi. But you know what? Let me look it up. Oh, Arkansas wins 16-13. Big celebration. Sam Pittman's doing a great job, man. And it looked for all the world like this one was going to go sideways for them, and it didn't, and they pulled it out. These games matter. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the playoff conversation or the SEC West, but it matters so much. You look back several years from now, and this is not Major League Baseball. It's college football, and these games are worth 1 of 12 instead of 1 of 162. These things matter so much. I don't care that it's a lame duck staff. I mean, that staff that's lame duck, they pushed Bama to the limit the week before, and Arkansas went into their building and got the win. Congratulations to Arkansas. Also, Michigan State, they make sure they stay emphatically in that playoff conversation and set up a huge showdown with Ohio State Saturday. They beat Maryland 40-21. And Oregon, late game last night, and it was the decider for what turned out to be a winning week again for us on the Ramen Noodle Express. 38-24, one of the biggest games in the country this Saturday is Oregon at Utah. We were 49% to go to that game. But Ohio State and Michigan State Barely won out on that one. There will be time. There will be time. And those are some of the other added takeaways. And I'm looking around. And yes, there was a dust cloud yesterday. I mean, there were some big games. There were some big teams that fell. I still don't think it's over. I still think there are some really, really big upsets somewhere down the road. And that road, you can see the finish line. You can see Conference Championship Saturday. It's just the air is so much thinner up here in November. It's so much thinner. So don't be shocked by anything.